Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video in the interviewing series. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Leah Steele. Hi Leah.
Hi.
I'm sure a lot of people already know you, either from LinkedIn, your training sessions, and you also did an event with us at Surrey JLD for Mental Health Awareness Week. But for anyone who somehow hasn't come across you before, can you tell us a bit of background about your journey into law?
I always go bright red when people say this. Somebody goes, you know everybody. No, I don't. I know about 10% of the profession now. So my name's Leah Steele. I run this business called Searching for Serenity, where I provide mentoring and training and coaching to individuals, but also within businesses and particularly within law firms, all around burnout and imposter syndrome, stress and resilience. And the reason for that is because I used to be a lawyer. I actually passed my bar exams 15 years ago today on the day of recording this. So I was called to the bar initially, cross-qualified to become a solicitor, specialised in contentious wills, trusts and estates, mental capacity, paying for care. It's really difficult to understand why I might have had issues with burnout with those kinds of areas of law. So I'm the coach and trainer who's been there, who isn't going to tell people to sit on a meditation pillow and just switch off at 5:30. That's when you're paid until. We've got to have more realistic solutions, and that's what I focus on.
Sounds good. So you briefly touched on the reason why you left practicing as a lawyer and do what you do now, but can you give us a bit of detail as to what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I was called to the bar, but I was called to the bar in 2007. I wanted to be a criminal or family lawyer, and there were some changes going on in the market at that point. So I was trying to pursue pupillage, but I needed to be working. I don't come from a background where I could be financially supported, so I got a job as paralegal. Fast forward 6 years, pupillage didn't happen. I had been working as a paralegal for all of that time in personal injury, because that was the growth market at that point. And I persuaded a firm to help me qualify. But throughout that 6-year period, because being an unqualified lawyer or a partly qualified lawyer doesn't pay very well, I'd had second and third jobs on top of it. So I think I worked out that by the time I qualified, I'd worked 6 years as paralegal or a legal assistant, and I'd worked an extra 2.5 to 3 years in paid overtime, never mind the unpaid as well. As we all know, there's a lot of unpaid overtime in the job. So I qualified into contested wills, trusts and estates, and just rapidly had this career that, looking back, I wonder what on earth happened. Contested wills, trusts and estates work can be very emotional. You're dealing with families in dispute after they've been recently bereaved. They're fighting over money, something else. And for a lot of people, they're also fighting for security, particularly in Inheritance Act claims or proprietary estoppel, where they've been promised something and relied on it. So there's a huge amount of emotional weight that comes with it. And I was that person. Oh, but you're so good with the difficult people. Oh, but you're so good with the stressful people, the ones with the severe intergenerational trauma, which I was, because I know that and I've lived it. So it was having a secondary traumatization issue for me. I also was going through a lot. I changed jobs shortly after I qualified, and my mum was rushed into hospital 2 weeks after I started the job. And just to show you how wrapped up in the compliant, don't say boo to a goose, try not to rate. I mean, anybody who worked with me will find this hilarious, but you know, some of it seeped out, but trying to just maintain control of everything. My mum was rushed to hospital late on the Sunday night. I was working in Cardiff. I lived in Bristol. She was in Bournemouth. Wow. I went to work on the Monday morning. It didn't even occur to me to say to my new employers, I'm sorry, my mum's in hospital, I've got to go. I went to work and tried to sort everything out from my desk. That was the kind of hyper-vigilant control I had of my career. Add to that secondary traumatization, add to that working long hours. I was commuting 3 hours a day. I was given areas of law that nobody else in the firm dealt with repeatedly throughout my career. But in particular, I was advising some very high profile clients on something that nobody could supervise me on at a year qualified. It was terrifying. And I took all of that responsibility very well. I took a lot of responsibility for all of it. And what ended up happening was getting more and more tired, more exhausted, falling asleep on the train on the way into work, falling asleep on the train on the way home from work, and waking up at some point between Bristol and Taunton, having to get my partner to pick me up. Feeling more cynical and disengaged from everything. I remember attending a training session where I'd been up since 5 a.m. It was 7 p.m, and the training session was running late. I knew I wasn't going to get home till midnight, and I'd be up at 5 the next day. And I was sitting there thinking about this trainer, thinking, it doesn't matter because I'm just a blunt instrument that people use to bash their relatives. And I don't believe that at all about contentious probate work. I love the work. I'm still heavily involved in it now, weirdly. And yet that was how removed I was from it. So it just really spiraled for me, and quite quickly. There was a lot of intensity. There was a lot of pressure, internal as well as external. There was a lot of responsibility, a lot of requirement to hit metrics, to get things done. And it ended up spiraling to the point that shortly after my mum died in 2014, at the end of 2014, it just wasn't functional. To the outside world, I was. And I know I was, because people who were my clients back in that 6-month period still are connected with me on LinkedIn now, and they had no idea. You know, they've seen what I talk about now and go, I had no idea this was going on for you. But I was in the toilets crying a lot. I was struggling. I was sitting there not able to construct a sentence, never mind a full letter before action, which is terrifying. And I realized that some things needed to change. And that's really where it all started.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really amazing story. I mean, the fact that, you know, you went through all of that and you're doing something so positive now is just really brilliant. And it was interesting what you said about people not spotting it. There's something that you often get with mental illness, anxiety, depression, burnout. People say, oh, I didn't know. You always look so happy. And the fact is, you just don't know what's going on in someone's mind.
No. And particularly with burnout, it's often burnout and imposter syndrome is so interlinked. So we have this thing of, if people find out what's going on, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to lose my job, my livelihood, my security. And so we lock it down and we try to remain as functional as possible. And that's why I talk about life outside of work just narrows, because everything ends up in service to your career.
Yeah. To
try and maintain that semblance of control and safety. And you know, I actually said to my partner yesterday, it's like, oh, it's no wonder I was a rubbish lawyer. He was like, you weren't a rubbish lawyer. What are you talking about? Because I still sometimes feel that, oh, if I'd been smarter, if I'd been a bit this, if I'd been a bit that, it would have been okay. And it's really not.
Yeah.
It was this hyper-vigilant control. And particularly for lawyers, we work within an industry where we're not told that it's okay to struggle. We're given this, consciously or unconsciously, this vibe of, well, you have to be perfect because otherwise you're just like your clients. And that right there, I mean, that could be a whole hour's discussion. But, you know, there's that thing of, we feel like we need to maintain this safe distance between what our clients are experiencing and what we're experiencing, even if they're parallel. Yeah. And that's worrying and slightly toxic.
Yeah, definitely. So you've on the more positive things, you mentioned searching for serenity. Tell us a bit more about that.
So this phrase, actually, the phrase itself came about a month after my mum died. I was working, I'd gone back to work 3 weeks after she died. I was working 4 days a week, taking 1 day a week annual leave to travel to my hometown to clear out my childhood home because the house was rented. And I'm sitting there on the stairs one day, and her landlord's ringing about when he can get the key back because he wants to rent it out. And I was getting messages about something kicking off at work, and I'm sitting there on the stairs thinking, I've got to now drive 3 hours to Bournemouth to throw away half my childhood, basically. And I was sitting there head in hands going, I'm just searching for some kind of serenity. And that phrase came back around to me. So that was January 2015. That phrase came back around to me about 18 months later. I changed jobs. I moved to a firm that was closer to home, that was supposed to be less intense. It was the wrong thing to do. And I changed everything about my life, and these things weren't working. And I was like, well, why is it not working if I change my job, if I change my location, if I stop the travel? Because it's with me, right? The pressure's internal, the demands are internal. And this is when I started I call it like being like Frankenstein and the monster, because I was basically experimenting myself, what worked and what didn't. Green juices do not fix burnout. Yoga poses are nice, but they do not fix burnout. Yeah. And then going into the more kind of mindset, the environment of what's going in, looking at the environment for the first time as somebody with kind of a perspective and going, oh, this is a bit odd that we behave this way, that we do these things. Why do we do these things? And basically I decided to set up a business taking some of the work that I did that was non-regulated, and I was going to do it online. And I was putting stuff together, and a friend turned to me and said, "You're not really excited about this, are you?" I said, "Well, no, I mean, it's good, it would be good money, I'm sure, but it's not what sets my heart on fire." And my friend said, "So what's the thing that you can't stop talking about? What's the thing that when you're at the pub and somebody puts a second glass of wine in your hand and you open your mouth and everyone goes, oh God, here she goes?" And for me, it was why so many brilliant people leave their careers. It started with why women in particular leave law. You know, we all know about the brain drain. We know that it's more than 50% of newly admitted solicitors that are women. And yet we get to the more senior levels and we're looking at 35% less.
Yeah.
Why does that happen? And what then expanded was, why do we all struggle with this? These key issues of burnout. I'd come across this phrase in 2013, was told burnout was something that meant you could not cope with stress. You had to eradicate all stress from your life, which is hilarious. Imagine telling somebody that the last 2 years that we've had. And that's really where it came from. And searching for Serenity as a name just seemed so perfect, because it really, for me, summed up that feeling that I had sitting at my desk or crying in the toilets at work, just wanting to feel okay, just wanting to feel some kind of peace, some kind of serenity, feeling okay with what was going on and not being overwhelmed by it all the time. And what that's 6 years on from starting it, what that's now developed into is working with individuals on a one-to-one basis, group trainings. I think I've launched it's got to be over 100 group programs and workshops now. But also going into businesses, into law firms. That started in 2019. So I've delivered training to nearly 3,000 delegates across nearly 100 events. Just trying to get this shared language, this shared understanding that I don't think law firms, law firm owners are monsters. I don't think that people who experience burnout are victims. What I think we've got is a system that's developed for a very long time that none of us have really critically looked at and tried to change. We've had odd pieces here and there, the law breakers and the disruptors, but really it can be done better. It can be done more sustainably, less harmfully, more productively, more profitably, you know. And that's really where I'm at this point, is trying to bring all of that together to offer support to all levels of the industry to be able to do this job better, because we need brilliant lawyers. We need brilliant people helping to uphold the rule of law and hold people to account and make sure that the world still keeps turning.
Exactly.
That's my manifesto, basically.
I love it. Actually, you mentioned the key word there, sustainable, because what I wanted to talk about is your Sustainable Career Series, which is absolutely brilliant. But tell everyone about that. So the way that we do this, the Sustainable Career Series, is something that I did a couple of years ago. And I think when I first came across burnout, the advice that I was given was either bad or really expensive. That's the honest truth. I was reading reports that said you can't cope with stress, or I get people saying, these are all the things you're feeling, now pay £5,000 and I'll give you the answers. I did not have that money. I still am paying off debts from when I was paralegal. And I don't think that information should be free to access, should be expensive to access, sorry. I think that should be free and low cost to access. It's the support that's important. So the Sustainable Career Series, it's a series of 12 workshops. Each workshop is standalone, and each workshop is focused at one point of the sustainability puzzle. So, for example, we've had a workshop on burnout, we've had a workshop on imposter syndrome. We've got workshops coming up about how to adequately resource your work, what resilience really is, and how actually resilience has been quite ableist in the way that we've been told to be resilient. Yes.
So rehabilitating that concept, which is important for a lot of us. How to deal with supporting friends, what happens when you've got burnout in a group, in a work setting or a friendship setting. And so each of the workshops can stand alone. So you can go, yes, I want to know about burnout, thank you, and buy that workshop. Or you can get the whole series and get some support alongside it for a massively reduced cost. Mm-hmm. And to me, this is one of the ways in which I don't want to get too ranty because I could. But for me, it's really about trying to make the information and the resources as available as possible. I still have to pay the bills, don't get me wrong, and this month's been tough. But it's that intersection of trying to make the information and resources as accessible as possible, whilst making sure it's within a safe environment, making sure that people are taken care of. And so each of those workshops, I make them available for 30 quid and people can access the replay, but they can dial up and down the support that they need as much as they need. And that is one of the things I wish I'd had 6 years ago, 7 years ago. You know, if I'd had that, maybe things would have been very different. Things would have been very different. I would be an equity partner in a firm, and I'm sure I'd be an absolute nightmare of one. But, you know, I'd be earning a lot more money as well. So that's, for me, this concept of being able to facilitate support and information and resources in a way that is accessible, in a way that allows people to mold what they need and to take agency and control in what they're going to be doing, whether it's accessing the whole lot or whether it's just picking up the bits that they need, and making it easily accessible, flexible. Replays are available, resources are there for people to download afterwards. I had a message on TikTok this weekend from somebody saying, oh my God, I missed it. When's the next time you're running it? It's like, don't worry about that. Just go and watch the replay, and then we'll talk about it if you need to. That's the kind of open, accessible, flexible support that I wish I'd had 8 years ago. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend, I'll actually pop a link when I share this video, because, you know, I've gone for the whole bundle, and, you know, I'm an NQ, not a very well paid one, and, you know, it is, for the value that you're getting, it is so good. You know, it's really affordable, and that's exactly what certainly junior lawyers need, but generally I think the whole legal profession. So yeah, thank you for doing that.
it's insane to me that when we qualify, I need to stop saying that, it's bananas to me that when we qualify we get our management training and then that's it.
Yeah,
there is no kind of how to be a lawyer. And let's be honest, whatever route you've come through, probably the apprenticeship route is the best one for teaching people how to be a lawyer because they've been doing the job for so long. But particularly when you've come through the academic routes, the way that we're taught and the way that we practice are two completely different things.
Yeah.
And it is a massive learning curve. And often you don't know what you don't know. There are so many gaps in our knowledge that we don't realize until we screw up. Yeah. And this is not an industry that allows us to make a lot of mistakes. And so it can be terrifying. So yeah, for me, that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, another question that I have that you sort of did answer is, if you had all of these tools that you've got now and you're delivering to everyone, would you still be a practicing lawyer? And I guess the answer to that is yes.
So it's probably. Yeah. I mean, so I moved around quite a lot actually. You know, for 12, 13 years in the profession, I specialized in 4 different practice areas, which is a lot. 6 years in personal injury, and I did a little bit of wills and probate to get me qualified, but mainly contentious probate. Yes, all right. And then mental capacity work, high level court protection work, paying for care. If there had been a role that allowed me to move between those, or if I'd had, it sounds judgmental, it's not, because nobody knew at the time, but if I'd had what I now know to have been suitable support for the intensity of the work I was doing in contentious probate, yeah, it would have been very different. I wouldn't have ever felt the need to leave, I think, because I decided at the age of 9 that I was going to become a lawyer. I remember the day, because it was the day my mum walked into the solicitors to start her divorce proceedings and to sell the house that I'd grown up in. And it was the first time that somebody in my life had said, what's happening is not okay. That's not going to happen again, and we're going to make it better for you. And that was why I became a lawyer. And so, you know, to fast forward 20 years and to be practically exiting the profession that I absolutely adore was gutting to me, is still gutting to me to a certain extent. I don't think I could do the job now because I know too much. But I still, hilariously, I still get referrals from people saying they've got a contentious probate dispute, where to go, and I refer them into our colleagues and, you know, get a little updates with client consent and everything. And it's, you know, I still know how to run the files 5 years out. I still know the advice and the law. So yeah, I think I'd probably still be doing it, but for the lack of support at that stage. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. People don't leave, you don't work your ass off for 4 to 7 years to want to leave at the end of it. Even if you only come into law because it's a good job, or because your parents told you, or because of the money, funny, then, you know, you still worked so hard. And a lot of us have that sunk cost fallacy of, I've worked so hard, so how could I leave? And I just want to see people, this is the other side of it. I left law because I didn't think I had an option. And I want that to be different for other people. If people want to leave law because there's something else they want to do more, because there's something that they're drawn towards, that is very different from running away in fear.
Yes.
And being broken by it. And that is the bit that I want to change more than anything.
Okay. Well, you mentioned support as well as a big thing. What can firms do to improve the well-being of their employees?
There is so much. So I was actually, the data's over there on my desk. It's outreach. Let's see how much I can remember. I was reviewing Law Care's Life in the Law study last night. So this is a study that was carried out across the legal profession over 18 months. They released it, last October, I think.
Yes.
And it's one of the biggest studies of well-being in law that has happened so far. Often we get information from Resolution, because Resolution's very good at speaking to family lawyers and saying, what do you need? But there aren't really many groups across the industry that do that. So Law Care's the biggest and best, I would say. And what I found really interesting is the well-being options that were offered. So they were asking people what is offered within your firm. So well-being policies, signposting to external agencies, employee assistance programs, and there was 2 other things. And for each of them, it was like 50 to 60% saying, yeah, we've got something like this. And the highest return was something like 44% of people feeling that it made a difference. And the lowest was about 19%. So there is a massive gap between provision of services and their efficacy, basically, their perceived efficacy at least. And often with this, perception is everything, because if I, as a lawyer, don't feel supported or don't feel like your policy is making a difference to me, it's not worth it, right? Particularly when you've spent hours, hundreds of hours probably crafting this policy. So the first thing is that law firms are trying, but often, this is where I have to be very careful with how I phrase this. Often the initiatives that are brought in are not brought in consultation with staff.
Yes.
They're brought in because we think it's a good idea. We think it will be effective for other people. We have a huge generation gap, experience gap, and understanding gap in law, particularly with some firms where there is, you know, for example, equity partners that I've worked with who they qualified and within a year they were equity partners at the firm.
Wow.
So they don't, and that's what happened when you qualified in the late 70s, early 80s for a lot of people. Versus now, where you can be working for 15 years and not get there. How can somebody who qualified as an equity partner a year after qualification and who has always been taking out from the equity of the business understand the position of somebody like me who worked as a paralegal for 6 years and was in debt by the time they qualified?
Yeah.
And so if it's not done in consultation with staff, it's my perception of what's going to be good for you, but I don't really necessarily understand you. And this is where we get this gap between implementation and efficacy, right? So law firms in particular, we are not good at talking about stuff. We are not high on the psychological safety score. Psychological safety is the idea that I can speak up freely and say that there's a problem or say that there's an issue without loss of reputation or expertise. I'm not going to be downgraded in some way, that people aren't going to lose respect for me. And law's not great at that. We're very good at fixing other people's problems. We're not good at having discussions ourselves. So in order to increase psychological safety, in order to actually get the consultation and get the discussions about what we need, we have to have more discussions. And that's where I come in with delivering training. In part of it, I want people to understand what burnout really is. I want them to understand what is really going to work. But more importantly, I want them to have a shared language. I want them to understand how prevalent this phenomenon is across the industry. 77% of employees experience some level of burnout in their current job.
Wow.
So that's the first thing. We need to talk more. The second thing is the consultation, is actually asking people what would work. I think a lot of law firms are scared to do this because they think everyone's going to say, I want unlimited holiday and a budget for a banana boat and, you know, whatever it might be. And actually, you know, this is where we've got this gap, because most lawyers just want to be able to do their job well. They want good systems, good procedures, good support, and the ability to scream before they drown. And to know that when they scream, something will be done about it. So it's opening that consultation. Now, the way that I want to do this, the way that I'm talking to law firms about at the moment, and I'd be really interested to see your listeners, what they think of this. Because what I'm, oh, can you hear my voice closing down with fear? My God.
Drink your coffee.
Freud would have something to say about that. It is the hay fever as well, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So what I'm offering to law firms now is a package of training that they have, a bi-monthly training for staff on soft skills, imposter syndrome, dealing with difficult clients. Those I know a lot about that. How to put in place really effective boundaries, how to communicate, but more importantly, that every member of staff in the firm has access to one-to-one coaching. What this does is slip in between the levels of supervisor and supervisee, management and staff. It slips between the levels of HR and staff, but to try and improve engagement, improve people speaking up, improve the psychological safety. When I look back at my career, there were so many times I bit my tongue and didn't say, I'm really struggling, because I was scared at what the outcome was going to be, that it wasn't psychologically safe. I didn't feel psychologically safe, even if they were going to make it safe for me. So having somebody who's confidential, slipping in, giving that support, encouraging those conversations, helping people to get what they need in order to speak up. And sometimes just being that person at the end of the phone that you can just go, I hate my clients, I hate my work, I hate my, and just get it out. Sometimes it's necessary too, before we throw the laptop out the window. So it is, as far as I'm aware, it's completely new to the industry. The only things that I can think are close to it are, there's a couple of firms in London that have recently hired therapists for the whole office.
Yeah.
But other than that, I can't, you know, apart from maybe a wellbeing officer, there's very few firms that have a standalone wellbeing officer. I can think of one off the top of my head. There's no real facility at the moment for somebody to have a confidential discussion except to go to HR.
Yeah.
And depending on your firm and depending on your relationship with HR, sometimes you don't feel like that's confidential either. So to have something that's independent, to allow firms to get that support, because I don't think the firms want their staff feeling frustrated and overwhelmed and leaving for the most part. They want to keep them, they want to develop them, and they want them to do a great job as cheaply as possible, as profitably as possible.
Yeah.
And so being able to offer that support, for me, it makes total sense, but I appreciate that not everybody sees things the way that I see them. So
that is a problem.
That is a problem. Everybody should see things the way I see them. It would make the whole world much easier. But, you know, having been the lawyer in trouble, having been a manager, supervising people, you know, developing trainee solicitors, and knowing that often they wouldn't speak to the manager, they'd speak to me because I was safe.
Yeah.
But I had no power to do anything. And so I was still coaching people before I even realized it was coaching. That to me makes a huge amount of sense. But more than anything, I just want law firms to actually ask their people what they need.
Yeah.
Ask people what they need. Don't tell them, the new thing that you're rolling out without having had some consultation, either with staff, with a focus group, with external advisors. But people are, last night on LinkedIn is a prime example. I posted 2 polls on LinkedIn and I said, lawyers, I need your help. I need to persuade your firms that it's worth investing in support for you. And those polls have had more responses than any poll I've posted in the last 6 months. People are crying out for support, but they don't feel safe speaking about it, and employers don't always know how to ask. I'd like to see that change.
You don't see it changing, did you say?
I'd like to see it change.
I was going to say.
Yeah. If I have my way, it will change, by hook or by crook, whether I have to beat people with it or not. But, you know, I have too many DMs from brilliant lawyers who are at the end of their rope to think that it's okay, and to not keep beating down this door and reminding firms that not only do they have a duty to their employees, everybody knows this, but actually when we look at the stats that, for example, it's a Deloitte study from last year, they found that UK employers lose 56 billion a year due to 3 key issues: presenteeism, staff turnover, and absenteeism. Now, we've been hearing about the Great Resignation, but actually presenteeism is a bigger financial issue than staff turnover costs. And of course, we always talk about absenteeism, and yet it's a tiny part of the puzzle. It's like 6 billion compared to the other 50. And from the same study, Deloitte found that therapy, so the outcome for EAP solutions, has a 3.2 return, so £3.20 return for every £1 invested, versus team training and coaching, and initiative raising, which gives a £7.20 return for every £1 spent. And currently, if you invest in mental health or poor mental health training and support, employers are going to get £5 back for every £1 they spend. What other facility, what other money-making device allows you to say that within a business? You know, most of us as lawyers don't give a 5-to-1 return. So,
and that was going to be another point that I was going to make. You know, firms generally are focused on billable hours, billable targets, making money. So how would you encourage those sort of firms to invest in training, coaching?
Yeah, it's really simple. The first thing is billable hours. Oh, this is one of my bugbears. The first training that every law firm needs for their staff is confidence. And the reason why they need confidence is because lawyers double trim their time.
Yes.
We round it down a little bit as we're recording it. Oh, but you know, the first 3 minutes we were just catching up and talking about kittens, so we'll discount that. And then we get to charge it and we discount it again. If we could fix the confidence of why lawyers struggle with that, why lawyers struggle with charging their worth. Well, I hate that phrase, but like I still have a visceral response to that concept. Charge your worth. I'm worth nothing. But you know, so that would be one of the first places to start. But for me, it's good business sense. That's the first thing. It's good business sense. You get a massive return on investment for team training and coaching, according to Deloitte. I can't guarantee it for my work because, funnily enough, nobody's given me the back end of their finances yet. I'll work on that though. So it makes good business sense. The second thing is it makes good business sense because if those staff do then leave, we're not in a Taplin and Freed situation where you've got a firm that doesn't know how to handle burnout. And that's what gave rise to that entire employment tribunal claim for a managing partner. We've got a firm that's saying, I'm engaged with this stuff. I'm trying to help them. You know, we can lead a horse to water, but we can't drown it. And so it's helpful for those firms, if they are worried about people leaving, let's try and stop it first. And if we can't, well, at least we've done the right thing. We've tried to engage with that. And the third thing, you know, it's the right thing to do for people. So lead with the money, by all means, because we like money, but it's the right thing to do for the people. And any law firm manager worth their salt knows that developing a good member of staff is the most cost effective. It's far cheaper than going out and getting a recruiter to find somebody new, having the disruption, having the file changeovers. It allows better consistency for clients. We all know those firms where by the time a probate's settled, the client has dealt with 6 different fee earners, and it gives rise to a huge level of complaints. You know,
yeah,
this stuff just spider webs out. And I talk a lot, particularly on the compliance side, with Amy Bell of Teal Compliance, and we talk about how culture and compliance are so linked. Because if we've got a good culture, we're less likely to have complaints, ombudsman issues. We're less likely to end up on the front page of the Law Gazette, or God help us, the Daily Mail. Sorry, shouldn't have said that one out loud. I take the blame. But, you know, that's what we want. And so it makes good money. It has better longevity for staff, and it improves the legacy of the firm. It reduces complaints. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
That's my, is that 4 prongs, 5 prongs? I don't know. I gave up counting at some point, but that's my approach to it.
Yeah.
And it, you know, particularly if the firm is focused on billables, you know, looking at a training that is £15 to £20 per head, plus the time that's taken out, all you need is over the following week for each team member to bill an extra unit to pay for the training and an extra couple more to cover the time out of it. But the hope is that this will have a month-on-month improvement, particularly if firms are having regular training, regular investment, regular coaching, that we should see increase of 1, 3, 5% productivity, and certainly less double trimming of time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've convinced me. Unfortunately, I'm not a law firm owner, but
don't worry, you will be in a few years, and then it'll be fine. You'll have me on retainer. That's part of my long-term plan. I'm getting to people at the moment who are stepping up in management, and as they do, like, come with me. Yes, that's the plan.
Okay, yeah, there you go. You've planned my life for me as well.
Yeah. You know, who knew that this hour could be so effective, huh?
Definitely. Well, I've got one more question before I let you go. I wish we could talk all day. Unfortunately, I know you've got a place to be as well. So my final question is something that I ask basically everyone that I interview, and that's, what's your top tip for looking after your mental health and well-being?
There are so many places I could go with this. My top tip is something that most of us think we don't have time for. It's a 3-hour meditation. No, it's not a 3-hour meditation. Daily reflection. We are so busy doing every single day that we just run around like blue ass flies the whole time. And it's really easy at the end of a difficult day to look at what we thought we should have achieved, to look at what's still to be done the next day, and then to switch off. I'd like to see that reflection shift to what we've achieved, how we've moved the needle in some way, how satisfying the work is or isn't, and to move from the only time we really reflect on our work is our annual appraisal and feeling sick at that form, to making it a daily action of what went well, what didn't go so well, what do I want to improve tomorrow. If we do that, we've got a daily measure, we've got a daily check-in. That means that we identify issues earlier. We identify issues with external and internal earlier. We can track how we're feeling and how it relates to the work that we're doing or the people we're interacting with. We can start getting data to make changes, because often when people come to me, it's at the point of, I don't know what to do. I don't know how I got to this point, and I don't know how to change it. If somebody can come to me and say, right, so I started at this point and I've been doing this work and this is how my mood has changed and this is where I'm struggling, we immediately have stuff to work with.
Yeah.
And we can start playing Frankenstein and the monster again. So that would be the thing that I would say: daily reflection and a daily focus on where we should be proud of what we've done, as well as the mountain we've got left to climb the next day.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on that lovely note, thank you so much, Leah. There's been a lot that you've shared, which I'm sure a lot of people will find useful. I certainly have. And thank you, obviously, to everyone who's watching this as well. And see you all soon.
Thank you.